Of course, we're going to need to be mindful of time and kind of get to the point, and to a degree we can go through the agenda on a timely basis. I think that'd be outstanding. Common objectives on that. All right, first item on the agenda is bell schedule. Lori?
Okay, so I've had a chance to read the minutes from the other meetings. That covers a lot of what we've done in the task force so far, but picking up from there, I'm just going to highlight some of the busing discussions, because we're at the point right now of we've defined what are kind of like the ideal parameters, and now we're working with what can we afford and what's feasible. So our current model, as we all know, has secondary starting first, elementary starting second. Because of the length of time that our kids are waiting in elementary schools after school, we need a 70-minute gap between secondary and elementary start time if secondary's first. That's the amount, in order to stay with the same amount of buses that we have now. That's the amount of time our kids are having to wait, up to 25 minutes after school. So I think, we can all agree that we're not either going to move secondary 25 minutes earlier, elementary 25 minutes later, or a combination of the both, or of both of them. I mean, I guess we can decide if we want to do that, but I think we'd run into some barriers with that. So then we are looking at putting elementary years to try and decrease that gap time. Greg has advised me and Chris, Director Leader, that to stay within the current ballpark of our spending on buses that we're currently spending, that we need to have a 50-minute gap, 50, between our start times. Now that's assuming we have the same busing structure that we have now, which is where we've got some tiers. We've got buses that go out to get, in this case it would be elementary students come back, go out to get the secondary students come back. So that gap would need to be 50 minutes. Other options that we considered for busing that we've eliminated, we talked about having all ages on the buses at the same time. Basically, Craig and I have discussed this with Durham, and essentially that's a model that works for rural school districts and it works for really long bus routes. But when we've got shorter bus routes, like we do here in an urban area, to move to that kind of model, we would end up having kids spend a lot of time on the bus. For example, if they get out of elementary school at a certain time, they would have to ride the bus to go pick up the junior high kids, to go pick up the senior high kids before they would be going home. So that we just decided that the families of our district would not like that to happen.
Because it has to be a nodal system that you potentially transfer buses.
Basically, with the fact that, I mean, we do have some rural routes, but it's not the majority of our busing. So then we talked about doing some transfer points, such as like using the junior highs as a point at which buses come, have multi-ages, and then kids transfer. Craig said that that's been tried in the past. It's been a number of years ago, but that presented significant, or maybe it was the guy from Durham that said that presented significant problems for safety. It would require a lot of staff supervision to ensure the safety of the kids as they're transferring between buses. And it was not recommended that we go with that model. Another thing we talked about is having fewer secondary pickup points. For example, we're requiring our secondary kids to walk maybe a mile, ride their bikes a mile and a half or something to meet at one bus spot where we'd pick up like all of the kids for that bus instead of driving to the neighborhoods, which would obviously decrease the length of time for that bus route. State law requires kids to be picked up within 4 blocks from their home. So that was eliminated. So another thing we talked about was tiering elementary school start times. So basically what that means is starting different elementary schools at different times. That was not popular with the task force. Also not popular with our elementary assistant superintendent for good reason. For professional development that happens between groups of elementary schools, that would create tremendous problems for scheduling. Also, with the elementary specials being scheduled between, as many of those teachers go between buildings, that would create problems. And then the other thing is that with scheduling elementary school band and orchestra after school, that would be very problematic when elementary schools are ending at different times. And, okay, so then moving on to the final two options that we narrowed it down to ask Durham to look at, and they're currently working on feasibility and expense reporting that we will receive on Friday. Director Liebig and Craig Hansel and I will be meeting with Durham. So one thing we've asked them to explore is putting junior high and senior high students on the same bus with the same start times. So what that would mean is that there would be some kids waiting at either junior high or high school for the bus to come pick them up after they picked up whoever they're picking up first, which depends on the route. We're just asking to have it explored. It's just another option. We're just trying to think outside the box. Anything else that can be done other than a 50-minute gap in start times. I don't know where it will come out on that. Another thing the task force asked us to look into is having 3 different start times, having elementary first, junior high in the middle, high school last. Again, that would still probably require a 50-minute gap between elementary and high school, but junior high would be in the middle, which there'd be some benefits to junior high, having not such an extreme difference in time. So I don't know where we'll come out on that in terms of expense or feasibility. So where we've ended up is, as I said, we're meeting on Friday, and then we'll take the options that are determined to be feasible and affordable in comparison to what we're currently spending, and take that to the task force, and hopefully come to some sort of, I want to say consensus, because I'm not naive enough to think that we're all going to agree, but at least to come up with an idea of a few choices, and then those will be what we'll be discussing at the community listening posts.
So there's one more meeting.
One more meeting.
We'd have our board meeting.
Yeah. Now, there's a caveat that I said to the task force. I think I've said that after the listening posts, after we come to the board, if something needs to be discussed further, there's a potential we could have another task force meeting in February. But at this point, that's not what's planned in the process. We're hoping that this would be the final meeting, listening posts, and then board.
We're still expecting like February 9th or 23rd to be the decision-making meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any questions?
One thing that's just fresh in my head, just based on the robust discussion we had about the APR, would be with the combining the junior high and high school students and the busing. Just a consideration would be, discipline in those situations. That a lot of times unstructured times are where we run into the most discipline issues. So that combining a larger group of kids and putting more kids on the bus or waiting for a bus, those types of things often create more of those issues. So just as we continue to talk about those things.
Good point. Good point. Yeah.
We gave the task force the constraint that this would be revenue neutral, or I guess cost neutral, and we're still at the brainstorming stage as far as options and things, but I am totally buying into the cost neutral idea. That's just my personal where I come from, and there was a moment where people started to say, well, what if we spent a little bit more, if we spent more, we could close the gap a little bit, but
yeah, and
I'm sort of reconciled to the idea that if it does have to be 50 minutes different, well, then it has to be. But I wouldn't spend money to reduce that number.
Well, it's that versus class size, and unfortunately, I don't think the cost delta is 10%. It's going to be like 50. It's going to be big deltas to make big differences,
Yeah,
right?
I think that's probably right.
Yeah, Durham actually provided us with an analysis that was 5-minute increments if we went down to 45, 40, 35. And
But there was a moment where it's sort of
real big numbers.
Yeah.
Real big numbers.
It's exponential.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just if when we get to the final stages, it's just, and we've talked this before, the more we can document all the scenarios you went through, and so 3 years from now, we look back at this, yes, we looked at that, yes, we looked at that, yes, we looked at, you know what I mean?
Okay.
I think that'd be outstanding. And board docs helps us with that, when you're looking back at what do we do. And just whenever we get to the final meeting, it's just nice to have that summary.
And if anybody has any other ideas, I mean, it's a little late, I suppose. Craig will probably really be mad at me if I say, oh, I have a new idea, but, if there's something that you haven't thought of that you think might be worth exploring, certainly bring it up. I mean, we've asked, the task force too, if there's something else you thought of, which is where we came up with the, 3 different start times. So, basically people don't like that there has to be a 50-minute gap between start times because, the elementary feel one way about how early school should start and secondary feel another way about how late school should end. So
if high school starts later, did you guys talk about utilization of the 0 period and all that good stuff?
So I've been in contact with Matt somewhat about that, and we haven't gotten to any specifics yet, but I had asked if we could potentially have some like core curriculum classes during that 0 hour. Prairie, for example, has a 0 hour where they offer that. They actually only offer it Monday through Thursday, and it's a longer class period time than the regular class period time. So that would account for like weather delays or that kind of thing, if there's something of that nature that happens during the week. So I would love to see that explored further.
And we'd probably evolve to that, right? Doesn't need to happen like day one, but.
But so
Yeah,
that
there'd
would
just
be
be
only
collective
something.
bargaining implications with that about teachers
Yes.
about being willing to do that.
That's why it's probably an evolution, and there's going to be a lot of conversations, but it does open up,
So I think
makes it a
they
little
want
more
to be part of
viable.
that conversation too.
And I did run it by the ICEA reps, and what they told me was that essentially right now, we've got early bird.
We're doing that
And
now.
we've got teachers that are shifting.
Just shift all.
So they said it would be essentially the same concept.
That's
I don't think Brady and Mitch thought they were part of that conversation, so I think we just would
Oh,
want to bring
really?
them into that conversation, or that they would
I have
want to
it in
be
writing.
involved in that, so.
Well,
I do have
there's,
it in writing.
there's informal conversations and there's formal, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think it's probably good for all of us to get in the room and have the conversation about the implications that would be, if we were really gonna explore the 0.
you got to make it formal,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
I agree.
good. Anything else? Questions, Lori? Good to go. I'm feeling like we're going to be able to converge for February. Any concerns with that?
I don't know, I guess I need to know from you guys, do you have the
That's why I was asking
information you
everybody
need?
else. I think you're good.
Yeah, do you have the information you need to feel like we can make that decision in February? Or is there more information you're looking for before then?
I just want to make sure that we get, and as part of our jobs in task force, I guess, is to make sure that we get the, a full accounting of the costs and the advantages and disadvantages of different options. Because there's always something that's, somebody's got some new
There's
thing, oh, but what about this?
And that's, as Craig and I have talked, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
Because every time we go to Durham and say, give us the full story, we pay, what is it, $7,000?
Well, I don't actually mean from Durham, I mean from like Amy or our teachers who will say, well, yeah, but what about the before and after school
Unintended
program? Or what about the,
consequences.
all
Sure.
we need to know what we have to be worried about.
Sure.
It comes
I
down
think you've
to
gotten good
this option
feedback
versus
from your
that
committee
option.
members on stuff like that, though. They're pretty thorough, and it's a broad cross-section of people and a lot of representation there. So I think a lot of that's come out already, and I'd be surprised if there were something hidden. Maybe there would be,
But if you've got a hard copy of that breakdown of the cost per 5-minute interval like you were talking about.
Oh, sure, yeah, actually I have that
if
prepared
we
as a
could-
handout for the next meeting,
Yeah,
so it'll be online.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, at some point, as part of the public engagement, and this kind of goes to the Alexander issue too, or other changes we might make with boundaries. Is it feasible to simply send an email to every parent on our email list saying, well, this is what we're thinking about doing. Here are the options we're looking at. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Because you know how it is. There'll be people realizing this in late August. And I'd rather hear about it sooner
Yeah.
than later if they have.
And we're working pretty hard to try and get the word out about the listening posts and through student family advocates, and it's on the virtual backpack. There's been emails that have gone out. But there will be folks
I
that
mean, I think
will-
there's that moment when we
Huh?
actually have a concrete proposal. I don't know if that's before or after the listening posts. When we actually have well, this is,
Yeah.
what it looks like we're gonna do.
That's
Or
good.
one or
point,
two
yeah.
final options, and I
Is
don't
that
know why
something
we
can
don't just
do?
email everybody.
Yeah, we can send, because we can use Blackboard to do either email or phone calls. And we can delimit the field if you just want to email elementary or call elementary. We can just limit it to that population. If you want to do the district as a whole, we can send it out to everybody.
I don't know what the consequences might be, but I just think you're gonna hear it eventually from people, so.
I think we should try it. Just do it.
So I guess from that standpoint, all we need is content, and we can work with Kristen on that. She's real good at setting that stuff up.
Maybe you could set something up so that, instead of us, all 7 of us getting an email from everybody, there could be some central place where any feedback we get could be loaded up and we could just read it all at once. I don't know if that's possible.
And can you assure that people don't do it multiple times?
Well, we've got several options. Timing might be an issue in terms of that input piece. I have to think about that in terms of how to do that. I mean, getting the message out, we can broadcast. Getting input in, that becomes a much more time-consuming and complex process.
I mean, I think it's either the listening post or
Yeah.
email. Why not just do that?
Like they send us emails as opposed to a.
Otherwise, you got a
survey.
whole nother round of consolidating that data, right? I mean,
Sure.
so either come to the listening post or send us an email. All right, anything else? All right, next item on the agenda is attendance zones. Good news is the first attachment is unchanged, so we can decide if we want to go through that or not. Again, the only thing I wanted to emphasize is this is really feedback from the community from 2014-15. We're proposing a master plan process to link it up with the facilities master plan. It's got the facilities master plan increases. The process is unchanged. Focus on elementary boundaries, focus on Christine Grant Hoover. Any school capacity, so that was your question, Chris. I mean, I've asked Steve, you need to give us any recommendations on school capacity, balances or considerations or whatever. Obviously want to maximize walkers, and we got the transportation renewal happening at the next meeting, so. Proposed timeline, I've got it detailed in the packet, but this is kind of the schematic of it, so nothing's changed on that. Again, the big change would be getting the public input process, and that's the primary thing I want to talk tonight, that and the schedule. Canvas caucus, things we neighborhoods. Appendix 5, nothing's changed there, nothing's changed here. So in terms of the proposal, I put together just a way for people to input, so where we get people's input, the neighborhood name, a description of your neighborhood, and feel free to attach a map, a picture, whatever. We'd have neighborhood leaders. They provide us the input on their preferred elementary choice and then the rationale for that choice. You got the feeder systems, which remain constant. So as you're picking a elementary, you're picking a secondary feeder system. Of course, there's an asterisk beside Kirkwood because they have the option to go to Northwest Junior High. And then, canvas the neighborhood, and basically it's saying I agree with the choices of page 1 and people live in the neighborhood. And I think we want to make sure we're clear on that. We're looking for people that actually live in the neighborhood. And if people want to use an electronic tool, so there's a little asterisk at the top. If people want to use some other app, go for it. But just give us this information in whatever form makes sense to you. But that is the kind of where we're going.
I'm sorry, I just think I'm missing a step. So who's this going to be given to, or in what context?
So the next board meeting, we want to have this ready to go on the webpage so that people could use this.
So anybody who wants to can just go on and fill it out.
Yes, and send it back.
So by neighborhood, you don't mean attendance area, you mean something smaller than attendance areas.
Whatever you consider your neighborhood to
Yeah, okay.
be.
Or larger, I guess, yeah.
So it could be the Chris Liebig subdivision.
Right.
That's why you gotta describe it. So how big is your neighborhood? What are you talking about? In fact, I think,
So, but is that going to be the way that it goes out to people? Is it posting it, or is this going to be also distributed at the various listening posts, or?
well, it's the same conversation we just talked with, I think, the bell schedule. We should talk, I mean, if we want to do a mass communication, it might be, we're reviewing this and we're looking for input. I kind of use the next board meeting as a public announcement that we're looking for this, and so I think we should follow your bell. Whatever we do with the bell schedule, probably we should do something similar here, but.
Well, I found myself thinking that same thing when we were hearing from the Alexander people, just thinking, gee, at some point, I mean, we could have identified all the people who are going to be affected by that change.
Well,
We
it's
just could have
everybody.
emailed them and told them, you're going to be affected. If you're getting this email, you are going to be in this new attendance area, and you're going to go here and there. And a phone call, and just so that we don't have people finding out later.
Yeah,
So I'd be all in favor of doing whatever we have to.
I think we do the same thing.
And when would they need to turn this in?
That's next.
So before we go next, my question is, especially about where it says I live in this neighborhood, just giving some of our neighborhoods that is more likely that we would end up being able to get someone from a local social service agency to be able to gather some of this information. I think we have to open that up a little bit in who can gather some of this information, because if not, this will be another barrier of us missing a significant population that's going to be impacted by whatever we come up with. So, I mean, again, equity tools. Vulnerable populations are going to be left out of this conversation, especially if we put it on there that you have to live in a neighborhood to gather this information, especially when we're in information, we're working in neighborhoods where the schedule varies, or if people are working different schedules, they may not have the ability to go out and gather this information from their neighbors. So I'm concerned about those voices are going to be lost, I think, in this process. And back to the thought exchange, wouldn't this be an opportunity to use that? Are we not able to use that?
No, but I don't know if the tool works like that for this type of data gathering.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna need an update on what that tool is for, because to me, it was to gather information from the community about specific topics, and if we're trying to,
It is, but the problem is this gets so specific. I mean, this is a very specific,
I mean, what you're really doing here is setting up a survey.
so why don't we send it out like an electronic survey like we've done with our other stuff? I'm asking, I'm not making an accusation, I'm just,
You're right.
if it's just a survey, then why can't we just send it out as a
what's
survey?
different here is it's not static. So.
Yeah, I think that's the
My
problem.
expectation is that neighborhoods actually canvass and caucus. They actually get together, talk about what they want for their neighborhood.
Yeah.
By the way, I've seen this done very successfully in the
Yeah.
past.
So,
Our problem with setting this up as a survey is we don't know what A, B, and C are. They are self-determined by the survey takers.
Can we include that in the survey though? Like, we might not know their name, but they could describe.
The survey would have to say, do you want to be in A, B, or C? But the group, you will have to have individual groups in the community have to be able to define A, B, or C. So they're going to do that on here by writing that information down. I don't know how we would do that in an electronic tool, because you'd have to fill that out.
You have to use addresses.
I mean, but wouldn't it, I mean, I'm just even thinking about the fact of it being electronic. Wouldn't it be easier to gather, because who's going to input all this information in here? We're creating more work for somebody by creating this
But
document.
the
I'm worried about.
neighborhood name at the top is determined by our citizens. So I don't know how we write a survey
Well-
when the neighborhood name hasn't been, I mean, I can't say, Phil, you live in and call it the Elmridge neighborhood. I don't know that that's a neighborhood.
Well, I think what Latasha's saying maybe is you could do something that's more of an individual survey and more of a primary and less of a caucus. I mean, if you sent just a questionnaire out to everybody and said, look, put your address in here and tell us your top 3 choices of where you'd like to have your kids go to school, we'd still be getting information, and we could put it on a map, and you just wouldn't get the same sort of information that's, oh, I think of myself as living in this particular neighborhood, but it might fall into that pattern anyways. So, but you might get, I don't know, I mean, I kind of agree.
We can
that
do
get
a
more
both
people that
and
way.
thing, because I just worry about this, because I'm even thinking about our elections and what areas get canvassed and which areas do not get canvassed, and about the mobility of those neighborhoods of doing that and leaving out significant amounts of kids and families, because they're like, don't come to my door, I don't know you. And yes, it would be great if we can force this kind of get to know your neighbor kind of situation, but I worry about us coming in and saying we're going to force you to get to know your neighbors when we're dealing with people who have experienced trauma, people who are refugee populations who have experienced different things, and people just come in that can, you know what I'm saying, and then asking about schools, language barriers, etc. I mean, like, there's lots of pieces to this that need to be looked at deeper. I understand it may have worked well, but does this specifically work well for our specific community about gathering that information? And we have to use more than one way of gathering that information, is where I'm coming from. I think what's created here, obviously time and effort has gone into it, and it can be very helpful, especially in particular neighborhoods, but I really think that when we're starting to look at more of our vulnerable populations and subgroups, I think they will not participate in this.
Well, here's my pushback to that. In the last year, I've seen great discretionary busing. When people have kind of skin in the game, they show up.
Well, they showed up after it was already decided, though.
No.
Well, some of them,
So
okay.
Pheasant-
I'll go ahead and give you your moment.
Pheasant Ridge,
Mm-hmm.
20 people here showed up to listen to me talking about busing.
Right,
We had other communities show up. Now, I agree, Alexander happened later
right.
because it was kind of a changing dynamic, but for people that had a bus that were gonna lose it, they got organized and showed up. So I'd be surprised. I don't have a problem with the and game,
Mm-hmm.
but I sure like to give this a try, because
I'm just saying, I don't think this should be our only try, is all I'm saying. I mean, we can put this out to the community, but if we only put it out as this the only opportunity and only way to gather this information, I feel like we, at this point, having 13,000 students, we have to be able to, and we're showing that through our equity stuff, is you have to have multiple ways to be able to gather this type of stuff, because if not, then only one voice gets heard, and I'm concerned about that if we don't have another way to gather this
there's gonna be
information.
listening posts later too, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is
But then
just-
we also know these specific groups that I'm talking about rarely come to those listening posts.
All I'm gonna say with that, present a recommendation, so. I'm passionate about this, so I went and created it, and I'd like to proceed with it. If
Yeah.
there's an and,
That's what I'm just saying, we need an and before we roll this out, as this is the only.
Well,
method.
as a potential and, how about just an email to everybody saying, tell us your top 3 choices for elementary school, junior high? Well,
I'm
that's-
not interested.
Right. I mean, I know that would result in 13,000 emails, and maybe that's too much to handle, but it would be information.
The advantage that I personally see out of groups that are inclined to canvas, you know, and I hear what Director Deloach is saying about groups that would be not partaking in this, but having gone through some boundary discussions and some big discussions in the last 2 years, it is not uncommon to have an email from a person who lives right next door to another person with diverse, incredibly different opinions. Of course, that's expected. But the idea here is we're not moving individual households. We're not planning individual households. We're planning for neighborhoods. And this gives us some idea, some aggregate idea of what type of opinions reside in blocks or groups or subdivisions or developments or whatever.
Seems like you would get that same idea, though, if you could, if it wasn't too laborious to just aggregate this data that we're getting from this area.
It is too laborious.
Well, if it is, that's a different thing, but I mean, you're gonna lose some data if you just do this.
And I think it also enables.
so I'll just ask this, are you gonna lead that though?
Say that again?
Are you gonna lead that process?
What do you mean? You actually count them?
Lead the whole process, start to finish.
I actually don't know what you mean. I mean, I literally could dictate the email right now.
Well, it's an idea, but are you gonna go lead and make that primary happen? So you're gonna create the survey and get it done with these guys, but,
Well,
I mean, so how are you gonna do it?
I'm happy to do what, again, it doesn't seem all that, I could write out an email
that's what you mean. I'm more worried about whether it's gonna generate so much that it's too much work for people to have to process.
I'm happy to add the and. I'm looking for who's gonna go lead that development process.
Well, I'm just sort of a little not entirely clear on how much that requires other than just kind of writing out an email.
I'm willing to look at some options because at least I owe it to at least my constituents. I know this is not going to be the number one effective way to reach our vulnerable populations. I wouldn't even fill this out, and I live in my neighborhood. That's my own personal opinion. It's nothing against you or this form that's created, but I'd be like, I'm not about to do all that, So I just think that there's got to be a more simple way to gather this, and I'm willing to reach out to specific populations and try to see if I can gather folks and to get some of the information. Other board members want to come along. I think it may be easier to gather folks together and have them fill it out at a location or something than to try to do this whole I'm going to knock on your door, because someone's knocking on my door at my house. We looking like we don't know you, and you will be standing outside the door, and you will see us functioning, taking care of the kids, and you'll still be standing outside the door because we don't know you. Why are you at our door? That's just the culture of my family. It's not safe.
So here's
I don't
a
know
question.
you.
Could school communities have nights where perhaps have a night where their students and families can convene in their community space or gymnasium or whatever? And I mean,
those things are already happening. Why are we not taking advantage of it?
Well, what I'm saying is that if I walk into my children's elementary school, I immediately see 5 people who live in what I consider my neighborhood. And when you say, okay, you want to do this, here's a night that we're going to get together at Lucas, at Shimmick, at Wood, at whatever, and then people walk in and self-identify with what neighborhood they feel they're a part of, then that's a centralized location without the door knocking that you're discussing.
Of course, you've only got your elementary students then.
Just to play devil's advocate a little bit on it, we've got about 1,500 out of 7,000 kids that don't go to school in their home attendance zone. So if you do it at school, they're going to be geographically removed from their home neighborhood. Not that you couldn't get the information from them at school, but they're not going to be in their neighborhood when they fill it out. I just share that just as a reminder.
I just mentioned, because it's only elementary, because it is only elementary boundaries, but if you're a secondary parent, you want to go to a different secondary school, you might say, I want to be at a different elementary school.
Just a question, are we thinking about this for the entire district or only for areas in the district that are likely to be affected by the opening of
Well, I think you open it to the entire district, and you provide the guidance on, we're looking to open up Christine Grant, Hoover East. Maybe Steve has some capacity recommendations, but then so I think it's open to everybody. I think we can define the priority on the scope, but
You're going to see the most participation in the areas where they.
Yeah.
I don't know what all the drivers are. I don't know what's motivating people.
So I have a few other comments, if I could, that'd be all right. So one thing that really concerns me is that there's only a place to sign if you agree. So what if you don't agree? You don't sign, and then you don't get a voice?
Yeah, or you
Or
develop
can there be like several forms?
I think you develop a counter proposal. Yeah, it'd be interesting. So if a neighborhood is split, I suppose you could find the same neighborhood providing 2 different. That would be the counsel I'd give people. Now, ideally, your neighborhood comes to some reasonable consensus, but if not, I'd probably advise them to each fill out their point of view here. That sure could happen.
Yeah, I definitely think it can happen. Another concern I have is that in our middle income neighborhoods that are used to go into a school that's a lower FRL school, what are we looking to accomplish with our redistricting? Are we looking to accomplish socioeconomic balance over parent preference? Because what if nobody chooses the high FRL school, are we gonna say, okay, well then we won't change the boundaries for that school? Because I think it's highly likely that a lot of people are gonna choose to be at the same school that they're at, and they're gonna choose another school, they're probably not gonna choose the high FRL school. I think it's highly likely.
Yeah, maybe.
I think it's the unusual person that would say, yeah, I'd like to go to that high FRL school. So are we gonna just say, well, thank you for your opinion, but we're gonna move you anyway?
Yeah, I mean, we need to be clear in the process. We decided in the end, so, and I'll probably put together a descriptor on the process that kind of explains that, but, I mean, this is input. At the end of the day, we will be the decision makers.
The other thing that worries me, and I'm sorry, I'm just giving you lots of concerns, but it's things that have come to me, is that, you know, there's a range of schools in areas, and, you know, maybe people say, well, I'd really rather go to that middle FRL school, but I don't want to go to the low FRL school. But then maybe that middle FRL school is already balanced. You don't need to move any kids there. That one's already functioning, okay. So are you gonna move kids out of there because this group over here doesn't wanna go over here? But yet for purpose of balance, that would be moving fewer kids.
The way I'm gonna answer your question, I see the scope being opening up east, Christine Grant, and capacity changes. I don't see the scope being going across the whole district, driving balance. Because we're linking it to the facilities master plan. So if you think we're gonna go upset the apple cart in some area that the facility master plan has absolutely nothing to do with, that's not my,
Okay. I wasn't clear on that because all of the elementary schools are listed, so I wasn't sure if this is district-wide or if this is only the schools that are directly around Hoover East and
again,
Christine Grant.
I think we provide guidance on what we're gonna do. But if somebody wants to provide input on, they'd like to change elementaries, why wouldn't we want to hear that?
Well, because it's a setup for a letdown, because we're just gathering information to be like, yeah, thanks for that, but no, we're not gonna do that. I think that will go back to the community complaining, you're gathering this information, you're making us do these task force, and then you don't take that information. So if we're trying to gather specific information, instead of this being this huge process, then we need to zero in on exactly what it is that we want. What is it that we want from this?
Well, it was already covered in the process, but I'm happy to add. All right, where's the PowerPoint?
Yes, I was looking up to, there you go.
We want to determine, sorry, it's a little finance font, but we want to determine Christine Grant and Hoover East boundaries.
Okay.
If there's any capacity, class size recommendations from Steve.
All right.
There could be impacts. I mean, we always want to maximize, well, I think the transportation renewal could impact what people want to do. I don't think we're going to drive boundaries by that, but people may have input on it. And after that, it's just community input.
Well, if our number one objective is to find out the Grant and the Hoover, then shouldn't we focus there? I don't know if we need to drive this into the entire district if we're just trying to look at specific neighborhoods. It will narrow down if we're looking at specific neighborhoods, because we're talking about, our goal is about maximize walkers, then we need to look at those neighborhoods that will be relatively close to that school, and then we need to ask those folks to gather that information, because, you know, asking a kid that's, you know, their parents are like, okay, you weren't going to move me anyways. Yes, if I know this school has these excellent results at Lincoln and I live way over here, I'm like, yeah, I want to send my kid to Lincoln, but I know it's not an option for me to send my kid to Lincoln. So it's just kind of like, it becomes a waste of time, and I would rather gather good information from citizens that they know that we're going to at least take that into consideration. But if we just get a whole bunch of information, how are we going to kind of sort through that to get at back determining the Grant and East boundaries? I think go to where we think that area is and ask them what they want to do. Do you want to go to Lemmy, or do you want to, you know, I think we just ask those folks versus asking Corville Central families. They're like, okay, I'm not going to be reached by this at all.
A big chunk of Lemmy and Lucas are going to go to New Hoover.
And that's gonna open up space.
Well, that's what I'm saying,
Lucas.
that we ask them,
So then
but
gotta
do we
figure out
ask
who wants to go to Lemmy and
Longfellow?
Lucas?
Right.
Might be some people at Longfellow or whatever. I mean, so it does kind of have a ripple effect beyond just the immediate area.
Yeah, but there's some schools that are less likely
Sure,
that we
Hills is
know.
probably not too much in play.
So then why, you know what I'm saying, like, why would we do that, is, I guess, kind of what I'm asking is,
Because we don't know all the, all of this is your damned if you do, damned if you don't, pros and cons.
right?
Because if we limit it, and then there's somebody
Well,
says.
then we need to be very clear about that,
Yeah.
though you're giving information, we might not use it at all.
Yep.
I mean, like, without all the legalese and crazy language, like, be really clear. Thank you for filling this out, but there's a possibility that we're probably not going to use this information because our focus is
We
on
can't
these three
accommodate all
goals.
preferences. Yeah, you could say something like
Yes, I mean, I just think we need to be clear because then we get people in a huff and they're like, well, you asked me, I took my time and went around my neighborhood and you did nothing with it. I think that's another thing about our community saying, here the board goes again. You know what I'm saying? It's the same old, and they're singing that song in 2 years with the next people who's running. So, I mean, I just think we need to be wise about how we spend the community's time as well about when we're asking for this type of feedback because, you know, it might be every month that we're asking them from something, but I want to, at least the information that we're using, we're saying, we took your input, this part of it we were able to utilize, and this part we weren't not. But we need to be clear, if this could just be a fun activity for you to get to know your neighbors, Corville Central parents, because we're really not going to be changing that specifically. I don't know if we are or not, but we need to be clear so that folks are not frustrated with our need to get data, that they're not frustrated because we're kind of practicing on them about what we want.
So I will add some detail on process, we can clear on the, its input,
Yeah.
and I'll add some detail on, here's the primary objectives. I would caution us to, because of the dominoes,
Mhm.
I don't know if we can say the schools it impacts, because now, you can figure it out for yourself, if you're not close to Christine Grant or Hoover East, then, and if your school doesn't have a capacity concern that's re-identified, then
I just think that should be clear. That type of stuff should be in there to say, hey,
Yep.
this is what our priority is, but we're also gathering this information. Feel free to participate as you
I
will.
will add a one-pager at the start to address those two items, the process and the primary objectives.
I don't know if other board members agree or not. I'm just suggesting that could be helpful.
No.
Can we narrow it a bit though, so that at least people have some ideas who's off the table?
Who is off the table?
I don't know, I
don't
don't
think-
know, Horn? I mean, nobody's moving around Horn. Are they off the table? I don't know. I mean, again, it's like, who do we leave out? Because then they weren't part of it, but then.
If we're
I
gonna
think
talk
if you
about
phrase it-
capacity concerns in North Liberty, Horn could be on the table.
Horn could be on the table?
Well, I think it could be. I'm not saying, I don't wanna freak anybody out who goes, don't, but I just,
That'd be a lot
I've been
of
talking to
dominoes.
people who talk about the way that, things could get addressed. There's a lot of different possibilities, and
Okay.
I
A
kind
lot
of
of
agree that we
dominoes.
don't really know in advance who's off the table.
Bill and Tom, what do you guys think? I haven't heard from you.
I agree in part with Latasha. The district, and now that I'm on the board, I'll be inclusive in that, but we're famous for asking for information either we don't use or not asking for information that we did use. I mean, it's never right either way, or, historically it's not right either way, so. I don't know, I'm inclined to think of the east side as being somewhat different. Steve spent an hour and a half with the Hoover people basically explaining to them, which the people there finally now seem to understand, at least the people who were there, that their children's cohort, not a phrase I like using, but that's the way they think about it, will no longer exist when the current Hoover closes. They finally get that now, so are they interested in where they live and where their children will go more so than they used to be? Yeah, they are. But I would agree with you. I'm not sure that it makes a difference right now to Horn or Shimmick or someplace else. So there's that. I also think it needs to be simpler. whatever it is you're gonna use as a tool. And if Director Lynch is correct in the connection to the facilities master plan is a part of how this needs to be looked at, then that should also be explained to people. If you feel it's a big connector.
It doesn't have to be that way. That's what we heard from the public.
So, yeah, I mean, just historical context, 2 years ago, we spent the spring of 2014 working on elementary and secondary boundaries. We had numerous get-togethers. Secondary people said, well, this doesn't make sense to do secondary until the elementary is done. We came to a vote on some elementary stuff. The board decided, we're not going to do this. Let's go back to the community. We spent all summer long with multiple engagements where this PowerPoint, the steps in this PowerPoint could link you to the facility master plan, et cetera, all came from multiple community engagements all throughout the district throughout the summer of 2014, which brought us to 14-15, where we worked secondary boundaries because it was tied to facility master plan because Liberty opens in 2017. We had to make some decisions, and so that came up first. And now we're looking at Grant and Hoover East opening. And I think that if that narrative is there, if that is understood, then I mean,
Well, it's,
round and round we go. What comes
it
first?
is, but
It's got to be
another-
done.
It's another teaching moment because you're going to get a new section of the citizenry listening to this anyway. So yeah, you're going to have to explain it again. Some people will.
Sure.
Some people very well hang on to the history of the process.
Too well.
Too well hang on to the history of the process, but but it's still going to be necessary to explain it again. Going back to Latasha's question here, what is it ultimately that we want? If we're gathering information for the sake of gathering it, then if we're really going to use it as part of this continued decision-making process about elementary boundaries, all right. I could soon sit here, or I not say I'm agreeing with this, but I could certainly sit here and say, look, we're the board, we decide to be against it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
To the point where I'm not using, I think it's part of the process. We owe a reply to each of the people that input.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
We owe a reply to each of the inputs. So let's just say we get 20 neighborhoods. So I'm trying to close the loop on this. We don't use your information, or we do. And I think we owe a reply to the 20 neighborhoods. We accepted your recommendation or we didn't, and here's why.
I think really the call is for, I mean, it's a call for input. It's not a call for a recommendation. It's a call for input so we can use that input for our
Part of the process.
Yeah.
We're just trying to get it up front. I know it's weird.
Again, this
But
is-
here's the hard part. We're asking for it up front before we even get into it. And that's where it makes it weird, I think, or different. But that's what we're trying to do, is put it at the start of the process versus later. Because we found if you do it later, it ends up being too late, or it's late in the process.
or after the process then close.
Well, and unfortunately, what happens in our district, probably other places too, is that the ball gets rolling, the snowball gathers. And some people just aren't going to be part of the process till the end, and maybe our answer is, well, sorry, you weren't a part of the process. I don't know. I just know how this district works. Whenever we do redistricting, at the end, we get a huge swell of people, and at the beginning, in the first stages, it's much smaller. That's been my observation, being on the other side.
No, the resistance always comes in the end.
Right.
Absolutely.
Phil, did you want to?
Yeah, well, I think what you come up with, Director Lynch, is very good, and I think that, I'm for it. I think it'd be interesting to see, but like you say, if you get 20 replies, with this week you get much more than 20 replies if someone decides they're a neighborhood. Like if I decide my street is a neighborhood and 2 streets over it could be very large, but that's fine too. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And as far as getting 100% of the community involvement or input on something, probably redistricting comes as close as any topic that we do that will gather that. And listening posts, those things, I think this is a good start. And the comments about getting information and what we do with it, we'll do whatever we want with it. They'll accept it, we'll listen to it, or we'll ignore it. And the decision comes down to us. And that's the reality the community has to live with. So they can contact us, they can give us their opinions, and we can go from there what we feel is best for the global community.
I mean, if it's presented right, I would much rather be asked my preference than not be asked at all.
Right.
As long as I'm told, we can't accommodate everybody's preferences, but we at least want to know what they are.
Correct.
I don't have any problem with that. I'm still kind of having trouble visualizing how that's going to hash out. I mean, can you tell us more? You say you've seen it successfully used before or elsewhere.
Well, there will be lots of groups that'll organize. And I've done it myself in my own neighborhood.
For redistricting, or?
Yeah. And you get people together and we talk about what do we really want out of this, and what do we care about, and
I guess I keep thinking, I just keep imagining, and again, I don't know how feasible it is, but I just keep imagining if we just asked every parent in the district, of course we're just talking about district parents too, what's your first choice where you'd like the kids to go to school? And just mapped it out on a map. There might be areas where, it's like 50-50 or 60-40, and you'd say, well, that's not as strong a preference as where it's all blue or whatever, and you don't think it's feasible, or you don't think it's a good idea?
It's fine with me if you're going to lead it.
Okay, I'll lead it. I mean,
Seriously,
I don't know what that means other than just I can compose the email that would go out. I can't administer it. But I'd take a shot at it at least, but I don't want to do it if people don't want to do it. This one, I'm just having trouble visualizing all these neighborhood,
So Chris, I'll just tell you
caucuses.
that if you think about it, so when you come to a redistricting meeting, there's groups here, right?
Mhm.
I mean, think about when the meeting ends. There's groups that are organized. All we're asking them to do is try to get organized ahead of time.
But I just wonder if you're reaching anywhere near as many people as you would if you just did it individually.
I have no idea, but I do know that this will naturally happen. And hey, if there's another way to come at it, let's do that too. I'd do both. But I also know this, we've gone through a few years of redistricting here, so these groups exist already to some degree. And we're just allowing it the ability to provide input.
I need to find
Well,
out.
some of the.
Right, because I'm just like,
Not everybody.
I was never asked about any of this stuff.
I think some neighborhoods
Yep.
are more organized than others.
Hey, guess what? I don't care what we do, there's gonna be people disengaged, there's gonna be people with kids that aren't even in school today going, what the hell did you guys decide? You got 2-year-old, right? I mean, some people are paying attention to elementary, some aren't, and that's gonna happen no matter what we do. So I will incorporate the feedback primarily focused on defining the process, getting clear on our focus areas, come back to the next board meeting. In terms of timeline, I think you read all this, so, I mean, time flies when you're having fun, right? So May's gonna be here before we know it. If we wanna wrap this up before the end of school, I think we need to start.
It is critical we wrap it up before the end of school.
If there's other ways to gather input, I'm all for that. I would suggest if we want proactive input, we need it by the end of March.
What format does this need to come back in? Does it need to look exactly like your form?
Personally, I don't care as long as the information's close to it, you know what I mean?
Maybe an opportunity to use Nextdoor if people are connected to that app.
Well, that's why I had a little asterisk there. If you have some electronic,
I'm just saying, I'm just from my own neighborhood, but the thing is, that's huge demographic when you say Grantwood neighborhood. My kids are supposed to go to Alexander, but Grantwood neighborhood, because it's based according to how the city has mapped it out. So, I mean, it's a great way to utilize that app if people are connected to it, because some people are, but not everyone is. But I just think we need to go at this to gather as much information as we can if we do intend to take some of that into consideration. If it's just gathering information and we're about to piss off like the whole town, then I don't want to do it. Like, I would rather just be like, we made this decision than to gather this information and not utilize it. Okay.
So-
And just one point of clarification, will you say in the description that these are our 3 focuses, foci, whatever, that determine Christine Grant Hoover, focus on school capacity, class size, maximize walkers, so that everybody understands that's what we're gonna be prioritizing?
Yep, we'll build it right into the
Okay.
process.
Because I think it's important that they know what we're gonna be using. Because if we come back on them and say, oh, now we prioritize socioeconomic balance, it's gonna be like, no, wait a second, you didn't tell us that. That's a different story then.
Well, I'll summarize it, because I'll take the key elements of the PowerPoint and put it on this form, so that if you only see the form, you got the key elements.
Also, I mean, I think people need to know where Hoover East is. A lot of people don't even know where that school's gonna be. Or Grant.
Probably true. At some point, democracy requires participation. Be a theme you'll hear from me.
Quick suggestion, now that it seems like you've kind of had some decision with the majority, you know, kind of maybe bringing together some of the points that were made. You know, if this is done by the end of the week, I could pass it to some of our interpreters so they can translate different languages. That would be appreciated, so we can get it out. If it's done by the end of the week as well, there's a big, MLK event happening on Monday. That'd be a great opportunity to kind of get a lot of input right away or immediately from a variety of different groups. But kind of going to Latasha's point, because I agree that sometimes engagement, you have to be engaged sometime, but there may be a different way. One, we could just approach community groups about this particular thing, passing it out in respective communities. But then if they, asking communities is also good, so they have other means and ways of having that conversation as well, and come back before it with the thought behind it being that in May, some input has to come back. And so, you can either do something now and get it done or just not.
I love it. Except for the May part. I mean, I was gearing this to try to get as much input as possible by like the start of March.
Okay, that's fine.
I think if we have other processes going, it's gonna be by the end. So let me just run through this quick. So February, we're getting going, right? Here we are, or January, we're getting going. We got the work session, we'll talk at the board meeting. Probably have a work session on the 9th, start talking building blocks. And I'm gonna suggest we do not create any scenarios until very late March, early April. Okay? Why is that? Because we're still getting input and people freak out the first time they see a scenario. Now, we may provide some guidance on building blocks, so where are the kids, who might be impacted, that type of discussion. I would suggest we try to get input from the process we just talked here somewhere near the start of March. And it's all geared, and if there's other processes, it's definitely going to be at the end of March, because by the end of March, we're starting to, maybe March 22nd would be the first time we'd ever have a first round scenario. It won't even happen then. But we'll need to get the scenario so that we have a few meetings to basically work it out in April, right? So if you think about February, we get going, March, we're wanting to get public input. April is scenarios, and then probably the listening posts, and then May is you're trying to make a decision. So again, that was my only sensitivity to May, because and you know what, we will do listening posts at during or at the end of the process, but it just starts to get late, right? I mean,
no, that's fine, and that can accelerate kind of the conversation as well.
That's what I'm process question. Said I wasn't, but is this public information?
What?
When people come back with a completed form, is it public information? Will it be
yeah.
posted somewhere?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
In
I
fact,
think they should
sorry,
know that.
I forgot this point. I should have.
Because their
This
name
is
will
why
be
we need to
there.
write the process down. I would, and maybe I said this last time. I'd love to do a public hearing. So when I said neighborhood input options up here, I'd love to do a public hearing where those groups are invited to come and review it with us. At the board table, on TV, recorded. We don't do a lot of like full public hearings, but I'd love to
And then
do
we
that.
can put it on the website too or something, so people can review it.
Yeah, it's gonna be public information.
We can scan those,
So we should,
optically scan them, put them out there.
I think that's important.
so like I threw up an example, there's some dates here, like March 1st. Let's say, I know we got committees on March 1st. Let's say on March 1st we decided we're not gonna do committees, we're gonna do public hearings. And but it depends, right? If there's only 10 people, it's gonna be quick. If there's 30, it might take longer. You come in, you got 3 minutes to tell us what you're thinking. We have 2 minutes to ask you questions. We're on to the next group.
In an effort to reach more people, this might be a great opportunity to collaborate with our other city and county officials in trying to get this information out. I'm just saying it might be a great opportunity to say, hey, can you help us in gathering this? Because it impacts them as well, what this looks like.
So I put this on the joint elected meeting agenda,
Okay.
January 25th, with that kind of in mind.
Well, we will definitely be getting emails from individuals saying, this is what I would like. How do those get folded into whatever sort of collection of?
Well, I think that you should direct them to the canvas your neighborhood.
So we're only gonna listen to them if they go out and?
No, thanks
give
for
us
your
a
email.
neighborhood?
Thanks for your email, great, got it. Is that the point of view of your neighborhood, is what I would ask.
I guess I'm just in the minority on this Dirty Pockets thing. It just seems like
Are you talking
I
about?
would be a very big deterrent if I were told the only way I could put input really into this
It's not the only
process
way.
is.
Director Libby, are you talking about emails on the front end or in the back end?
All along we'll get emails about it.
Well, okay, so I think you guys might be talking about different stages of the process. With, my God, I almost said it. The process, in that, I hear you saying, Director Lynch, yeah, is that the view of your neighborhood? And I think that if it comes late in the game, if this information is available, then people say, well, here's what the neighborhood that you're a part of, here's what we have, here's what's on the district website, here's what the response was from neighborhood X, of which we consider you a part of, so thank you for your input. But I also think that, you're gonna have to expect high email chatter when it comes to this. So I don't think there's any only way or single opportunity for input. I think that this is one way for input, this tool. I think that the emails, I think that listening posts, I think that a public hearing, I think that, again, back to Leadership for Student Learning, engaging the community is huge. And I think that I think that we're taking a very good attempt at trying to be proactive at thinking of many, many different ways and steps along the way that we can be engaging the community for their input.
Can I ask a question? Who's putting all this information together?
What information you talking about
Like these forms, who's gathering this information?
when it comes back in?
Yeah, when it comes back in, who's pulling it all together and said, this neighborhood said X, Y, and Z, this neighborhood said X, Y, and Z?
Probably gonna be me, and I'm probably gonna ask Kim for some help. She doesn't know that yet.
Surprise, Kim.
Other duties is assigned.
I got a long list of those, so I understand. Okay.
Well, and this, I don't want to hit this drum too hard, but this is part of the leadership part. I'm willing to go lead this process, consolidate it, shepherd it, pull 9 yards.
Hey, I appreciate that. I'm just saying, I know the volume of what this could turn into. And I'm just thinking about things like SurveyMonkey that maybe you could potentially just put this in here and click, it'll pull it all up, collapse it, and then you have it. Because especially if people are handwriting this, taking that time and putting that as a Word document we need Kim. She might quit on us if we do
Well,
that.
no, I mean, people, so use technology, but you'll need to give us.
I'm just saying, I'd be like, no, I'm not doing
I don't
this.
think you're saying you're gonna redo it though, it'll be the actual piece of.
So that you just are gonna scan it, but then how do we gather that as board, because that could be like 200 sheets of paper. Are we just supposed to just go in and somehow figure it all, or is it going to actually be, I mean, like, I know that I'm getting down to like, but I really am trying to think about like the time that it's going to take to us to go, because people are going to call their neighborhoods different things. You know, we had a survey that was a map that when you put your address in, it kind of, you know, pinpointed you, and then you can do these 2-3 other questions. You know, I think as that information came together with as many respondents, then it may be easier. I'm just trying to figure out how do we have all these goals for technology. I'm like, how can we use technology to try to minimize some of this, because this is going to be kind of labor intensive, when we could be doing something else is another way to gather this. I'm even on your own time. I'm trying to look out for you too. So I'm just saying, like, if we can utilize technology to gather this, if there was a link that people can click on, I don't know.
Well, I think people should use technology. They'll need to give us this information in some
Okay.
form, whether it's a scan, a printout, or whatever.
I mean, this is just a quick question, Steve, but do we have a SurveyMonkey account here? We do. Okay. I'm just saying, I mean, so then we don't have to pay for those other pieces to come, because, I mean, they have it where you can set it up and do stuff like this.
All right, any further discussion on this one? Any objection to targeting March 1st if we were going to do a public hearing, and the committees can decide if they want to meet or not meet, or meet after the public hearing?
What is the public hearing in the evening, or is it during the day?
March 1st, 6 p.m.
6 p.m. Okay. I just don't.
I'm just throwing that out there, but. All right, anything else on this one? We're going to have to decide when we're going to quit, I guess, for tonight, but. Secondary tenant zones, I think all the information's there, so if you work from the bottom up, again, Brian talked about this a little bit, but this is really an extension of, a lot of this work started in 2014, 2015. I listed all the meetings that happened, so this is the beauty of Thought Exchange, not Thought Exchange, Board Docs.
Yeah, we don't have those. Yeah. In theory.
It's very easy to get in here.
We don't.
So there's a great summary of all the options considered. So if you're interested in all the options, this potential boundaries summary of rounds was pretty cool. And Lori, this is kind of a good example of, we tried to put all the bazillion things we looked at in here summarized. Some were by geography. I think it's in the next one. You know, some were by geography, some were by, we did it by cities, some were by balance. And then what we tried to find in the end was a balance between all those. So between all these documents on the May 12th meeting, if you're only going to go to one place, I go to the May 12th meeting to get a good overview of what happened. So now what's also in here is an overall rationale, which I just put the vote in here. Obviously, we looked at Appendix 5. We thought best 5 delivered the best balance. You can see the numbers. It was a dramatic difference. So, I mean, the SDS range went from 23.8 to 3.5. Special ed went from 7.5 to 3.1. And ELL went from 5.4 to 2.4. That was looking at the geographic option versus a balanced option. What was 5F? Again, all the options were savings. F did spend $240,000 more, and I mean, you can see the fun facts there. Scenario A and B were actually pretty good scenarios, but they put too many kids at Liberty. If you ask me, I'm not so sure I don't like A the best, but it started Liberty over capacity, and that's a recipe for disaster because it's going to be a growth area, so we didn't feel it was feasible. 4 years. Yeah, for 4 years. So we didn't feel it was feasible to start Liberty up north of 1,000 students. But it could be a vision. The other thing to know is some of the options required elementary redistricting, which gets a little complicated. What I mean by that is some of the options split like 5 elementaries in half. And it's like, well, what do you do with that? So 5F actually used current elementary boundaries. Just point that out, because you may look at an option and say, I love it, and then you realize you just split 4 elementaries in half, and that doesn't really work.
And clean feeders.
Right, and clean feeders, so we also, really want to get clean feeders. And it's not that, I think the preference was clean feeders, or if we don't have clean feeders, the cohort of students moving together needs to be a big cohort, right? And we just don't have that, so with 3 junior highs and 3 high schools, it just makes it simpler to go to 3 clean feeder systems. And then, of course, just noted that Kirkwood homeschool will be North Central, so they get busing and all the support that comes with that, but they'll be given the option to attend Northwest. Building blocks, I should have deleted that, but I was just going to talk it. If you think about taking, it's kind of obvious to take not North Central, to take Penn, Gardner, and Van Allen are going to go to Liberty. Well, when you do that, again, you just find your balance is way out of whack. Because your SES is like 15 to 17. You got low ELL. There's a reason there's no ELL at North Central. It's a low ELL area. And it's a low special ed area. It's just the way it is. Now, when you put those 3 schools in, you got to decide what's the next school. If the next school is like a Wickham, you throw all that balance out. And again, what we found is, as we looked at all the scenarios, Kirkwood was the best option. That was the closest, provided the balance, all that good stuff. Now, so I'll just say that, all right? That's how it all developed in 5F. You can go through the bazillion scenarios. Then a school has to go from city to west, because southeast is over capacity, city's over capacity. Somebody's got to go to west. And then again, it was the same deal. When we looked at all the capacities, the balance, everything else, Alexander was the right choice to go to west. So again, if Alexander's not going to west, some other school does. If Kirkwood's not going to Liberty, some other school does. And that's just where you get into the tough choices. Now, you're going to find, I think we've got some people here that think, we're going to find as you go through the elementary rezoning, there could be opportunities to fix some things that people think are secondary issues. So North Lincoln's a perfect example, right? Some people want to go to a different school, different junior high, we'll be able to fix that. Alexander, maybe the east side of Alexander should go to Hoover East. I don't know, but there's an opportunity via the elementary boundaries to potentially fix what people think is a secondary issue. I'm very interested to see how that pans out. But I've already told you, I personally have no interest in getting back into secondary boundaries. I certainly don't before we go through the elementary, because there may be some things we can do at the elementary level if you think it's not right, you know what I mean? Anyway, all the rationale, the background's there. You may already know it, you may not, but I think this is one-stop shop for everything you need to know about the rationale.
I hear what you're saying, and I agree somebody has to go from city. If you have 3 high schools, you can't have that much of the district going to city high. I don't know how many, I guess I see some of the people who were raising that community comment. I think the concern that people have is, I think we can see the logic of how sending Alexander to Northwest and North Central, and West, has these, effects that are desirable, but how is it good for the kids in that attendance area? Because it seems like unless you can articulate how it's good for them, it's like you're asking the kids there, who are some of our most vulnerable kids, to take a hit so that other things will work out. So if there was a way to at least put it in those terms, can you tell us, how is this going to work for them?
Well, Kirkwood has the opportunity to go to our newest, smallest junior high. And they're going to have the opportunity to go to our newest, smallest high school. That to me sounds like a pretty good benefit. They're going to have the opportunity to have better balance, better opportunities, and all the things that, all the opportunities at junior high and high school. So that'd be my answer to Kirkwood.
But what about Alexander? Because to me, to try to balance, which that word is starting to turn in my stomach in the wrong way. the Alexander kids, by trying to alleviate one inequity by creating multiple other ones, that's what I'm concerned about. I understand the rationale, but I'm talking about in real life how that acts. You know, we're talking about $240,000 of the kids just going back and forth to school, but we also have that equity policy that says the kids are supposed to have access. And if it's almost 7 miles or so from my house to Northwest, that creates inequities and additional barriers for the kids that live in my neighborhood that their parents may have a car, but they need to drive their car because they can't go to that activity. So I don't know. I mean, I understand the rationale. CL documents is great, but by creating barriers to try to alleviate and find balance, because we want less poor kids in one school than the other, I worry about that because, I mean, that's the language that's being used. I'm just saying. So, you know, I wonder about that. By trying to alleviate one is causing more problems, because then how does my kid participate in band if they can't get there? Because the bus route, if my kid misses the bus, one, they got to walk about 6 blocks to get to a bus. Then they got to catch the bus. Then they got to transfer buses. These are 12-year-olds now, right? They're 13. Then they got to transfer when they get downtown to the Corville bus, to get on the Corville bus to go over to the Northwest and finally get over there to get off, and then they've missed like half the school day. So that's what I worry about. We're creating barriers for folks in the midst of trying to find balance. You know, how do we weigh that? You know, how do we weigh that? How do we come up with rationale about creating an inequality in the midst of trying to come up with an equality? I don't know what the board's thought process. There's notes, obviously, but you know, yes, we know we have families at Alexander that could potentially work it out and make it happen, but as that community in that area continues to develop with the efforts that the different cities are trying to make to try to find more affordable housing for folks in that area because of trying to do the smaller lot sizes, but in 10 years that area is going to look completely different. You know, Sycamore Woods and all this extension is going to change. Are we creating more barriers and more inequities by trying to address one inequity? That's my point I'm putting out to the board as we look at this, because this is going to be problematic. And then what do we do when kids are missing too much school, and then they have to go to the tennis, then their parents got to go before a judge about them missing too much school, and then we already have inequities specifically looking at our Black and Latino kids, and this is going to negatively impact them in a great way from Alexander all the way to Corville. Are we not going to look down the line when we look at our evaluation of are we improving and see that we've actually created more disparity? Is my question. I understand where people are going and the rationale, and I understand the research. I ain't crazy. I got a couple degrees too. I understand that, but I don't see that by trying to address one inequity by creating additional inequities is going to help the district.
And your recommended next step is what?
I'm just saying we need to come up with something, but maybe we need to move some other things around or something. Or you're right, one school has to go there, but do we want to put the school that's way out here to go 7 miles, and there may have been another option?
Like what?
I can't tell you right now off the top of my head.
So
I'm just putting it out there.
I got tons of energy to go work.
Yeah.
I got tons of energy to go work with Alexander on how to make Northwest and West work.
Okay.
And
I just think the parents and stuff, they're looking at like how does this happen? What does this look like? Because we can say, yep, you guys are going to West, you're going to Northwest, but if you don't explain how that works, how kids are going to get back and forth, how they're going to be able to participate. There's no bus that runs that's going to be able to get me to band at 6 o'clock in the morning because the buses don't start running to 6 something. So my kid, obviously, that means there's an inequity that actually I will file a complaint against the district saying you put a situation where my family is unable to participate in this particular thing by creating this boundary. So it's actually litigation because it causes an inequity.
Yep, and we'd be fine with that in terms of winning that. So I don't even want to go there.
Okay.
I'm surprised the conversation's going there, but
I'm putting it out as thought of saying that we're creating barriers in the midst of how we're trying to create
so Natasha,
change.
so can I finish?
Sure.
got all the energy in the world to go work the barriers and helping Alexander make Northwest and West work.
Okay.
Got no energy to go rework secondary boundaries.
Okay.
I'm just telling you where I'm at.
Okay.
Can't wait to talk transportation next week, because I think we need to talk activity buses and things like that. You can also convince me, again, I said this, maybe the east side of Alexander should go to some closer school. Maybe, I don't know. You can convince me of that in the elementary redistricting. I got energy to work those two things, helping Alexander, elementary redistrict. I have no energy to work secondary because I don't think there's any better option.
Well, I think it's my responsibility at least to put it out there that this is problematic and that we pay extreme attention to of what this impact means for our district.
Let's go work that.
Can I ask Latasha a question?
Sure.
Seems to me that if Alexander stays, the only people who can go are Lincoln to West or Shimmick to Liberty.
Mhm.
Both, maybe, because they're both small. Now, it's true that that would have a pretty big effect on, well, you know, the disparities between the schools in terms of the FRLs would be pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking a different type of population though there. Those aren't high FRL schools.
That's what I
But the
mean.
resultant.
So if you're sending the low FRL schools out of city,
No, but I'm talking in terms of what she's talking about, creating super inequities.
You want to see a super inequity, look what that does to the high schools.
well, but
She's talking
I'm
about
sort of,
life
I want to know
experiences.
what Latasha thinks about, would that
I'm
be a
talking about educational
preferable
outcomes.
outcome?
I'm talking about educational outcomes in class and classroom environment and supports for our students and our teachers and work load. I mean, our weighted resource allocation model cannot absorb that kind of difference at the secondary level. It just, it can't.
And I'm trying to acknowledge that. I'm trying to acknowledge that's the cost of keeping Alexander at city, right? Is that
Yeah.
those disparities would then occur.
Well, again, you go back to the
And I
geographic
just-
solution, yeah.
But
We can't level the playing field with the weighted resource allocation model with that type of disparity.
Well, but this is also problematic in its own way, and so I'm just wondering, and especially sort of what your take on that is. I mean, would that be a preferable, or would you think that is even more problematic?
So I understand the importance of trying to have balance, which is the word that I said is churning in my stomach and it's making me ill, literally, because it's being turned into a coded word. I understand that because if you have, let's just put it out there, less poor kids, less kids that's going to be on these statistics in our annual progress report, people feel like that they can do more. There is some research out there. There's also other research out there as well that speaks to this being supportive. What I'm saying is I understand the need for us not to have one school just have the majority of our kids to have lower income situations. I get that, okay? So don't think I'm ignorant to it or I don't understand it. I do.
Nobody's saying
What I'm saying is by trying to address this inequity, by creating additional inequities, that's what I'm concerned about. I'm saying in this process, how do we address these multiple other inequities that we're creating by trying to address this one inequity? Because that's inequitable in itself. You know, you're trying to address this one inequity and then ignoring all the other inequities that you're creating. I'm just saying with that process that's going to cause additional problem. So maybe we have to spend $400,000 specifically on busing, right? Because now we need activity buses. And we talk about this education center. The families can't ride with the kids, so that's an additional bus. So we have to pay for that, back and forth, special events buses. I'm just saying, like, the cost is going higher and higher and higher for this. I'm just putting it out there. I understand I probably don't have the support from other board members to change it. That's fine, but I don't want to go down in history saying that I did not put it out there and say that this is going to echo into our future and it's going to bite us. So if we're not prepared for the bite, then I know down the line most people will be off the board when some of the bite comes, but the bite is coming about what we're doing here. So I just put it out there. Y'all don't have to do nothing with it, but I think that we need to come up with something else. And if we are so choosing to do the secondary boundaries in the way that we're doing, then you all need to list and let these Alexander parents know exactly what you're going to do to address the additional barriers and how we're going to finance that. Because that is fair. That's fair.
Let's do it.
One of the things I said numerous times though through last year's process is that I am not okay with, I know that you're saying that this is one thing that we're fixing. I am not okay with in allowing continued increases in differences between our school environments to occur simply because of long-time segregated housing policies and housing policies that have not been conducive to
I agree.
responsible growth.
I agree.
That's no, excuse me, let me finish.
Okay, finish.
That's why I think it's critical that this is one part of a 3-tiered structure to address inequities in our classrooms and improve student performance. 1 is this, 2 is weighted resource allocation model, which is more midterm or middle range. And 3 is our engagement with the Affordable Housing Coalition and with the municipalities to ask them to commit to responsible growth and to continually use our leverage, use our position to leverage them to do so and to follow through. I think it's critically important that all the steps we took last year, we were very methodical about our approach, we were very thoughtful about our engagement, we were very thoughtful where we started, our timeline, where we finished, it's done. I second Chris's sentiment that I have no energy to go back and do secondary boundaries again. I want to focus on elementary, and I don't disagree. This is the first time I've heard Director Lynch say, you know, that there may be ways to fix some of these problems through the elementary redistricting process. I'm all for it, but I'm not about going backwards. I'm about moving forwards.
For discussion, guys, you hang?
I guess
Oh.
I just have to say one more thing. It's hard for me to understand why we can have this attention to socioeconomic balance at the secondary level, and yet we're talking right now about our boundaries for Christine Grant. And I asked just a few minutes ago, what are the 3 things, or what are we focusing on? I thought I heard that wasn't our focus. Meanwhile, we have 70% differences between our elementary schools. I mean, you're talking 23% difference with secondary schools. We've got 70% difference in our elementary schools.
So as we figure out the Hoover East, let's take Hoover East as an example, we will work to balance
So the balance is part of it.
Yeah.
I think we need to say that. That wasn't listed there.
Okay, it's in the PowerPoint.
I misunderstood.
It's in the
but I didn't see
PowerPoint.
it.
So again, Appendix 5 is the board policy.
Okay, well, we need to be upfront that people understand
And we also,
that's an element in our decision.
Absolutely. So Appendix 5 is the ultimate board policy. There's a slide on, here's the 5 things we most talk about. When I said objectives, the number 1 objective will be to commission Christine Grant. As we do that, we're going to try to balance, we're going to try to maximize the lockers, everything in Appendix 5. We need to try to balance as we're doing that, right?
And I've said it before, but if we address the high FRL school in Kirkwood, or in Coralville, that's creating the FRL at Liberty to go up, we have only one way to do that, and that's to bust those kids within those current boundaries. So, otherwise the Liberty number goes down for FRL. Because
I don't
that,
Can you say
that
that
group
again?
that's coming in and changing the FRL number at Liberty is Kirkwood.
I don't understand the point.
I'm not okay with busing those kids to North Liberty to lower the FRL number at Kirkwood.
Okay, got it.
So I don't understand how we're gonna address it
Kirkwood?
without changing Liberty's numbers.
I don't understand. I'm sorry. I really.
I'm having trouble following that too. Can you say it again?
Well, here's,
What's that?
I just have a little trouble following it, maybe
Okay,
because it's so late
so
at night.
Kirkwood is in the Liberty zone. Kirkwood is what is bringing the FRL up at Liberty. Okay? So unless we leave Kirkwood alone with their 74% FRL or whatever it is at the moment,
So you're saying if we bring Kirkwood down to 30, it's not going to be doing what it's supposed to be doing?
exactly. Then at Liberty, we no longer have all those FRL kids because Kirkwood is different.
Yeah, and there's a couple master plan. So one, there's the expansion of Liberty, and there's an expansion at Kirkwood. That open up options for Kirkwood.
Okay, well, it's going to change the number at Liberty. If we change the number at Kirkwood, it's just going to.
It's possible, if we change the number at Alexander. So as we do elementary, we'll need to watch the high school numbers to make sure they don't get out of whack, because it's possible. All I'm saying is, the expansion at Kirkwood and the expansion at Liberty open up options for Kirkwood. And I understand that's a little ways out. But again, I'm back to public input. People have asked us to link it to the master plan. Don't go messing with people just for the sake of messing with them. Now, I will bring up one concept we haven't even talked tonight. So the other thing we're doing for all of our schools right now is trying to incent going to your home school. And you know that alone can pretty dramatically. So please be careful in saying we're not doing, and I think we need to better communicate this, but we can help all of our current schools by having people in their neighborhood actually go to their neighborhood school. Some of that got started with SINA, right? We don't pay for transportation now. You can say this better than I can say it. There's not a transportation incentive anymore to get bused and all that. We've phased that out. And then we're also the voluntary transfer. I always call it open enrollment. I'm getting trained. Voluntary transfer now, is basically an annual process. So there's no, I want to move to Horn and then we never revisit it. It's like, no, if you move to Horn, it's up for annual renewal.
Can I ask a question about that when you're done?
So, again, just let's keep that in mind as a base. We are putting that in place. Now, that takes time because we've said we're not going to go back and change history, but going forward, those things. So we know that would help Kirkwood. We know that would help Twain. I think it would help darn near every high FRL school. So we are doing that. Then we can start actually working, boundaries off the actual darn homeschool people versus everybody.
All I'm saying is I just don't want to hear that we can't lower Liberty's FRL number because by not changing Kirkwood. We have to leave Kirkwood as it is, otherwise it lowers the FRL number at Liberty and raises it at West.
I'm not constrained by that.
And we actually have in policy what our aspirational goals are as far as ceilings that we're comfortable with for SES, EL, and special ed.
Yeah, but I think what Lori's saying is if you were to redistrict Kirkwood so that it had more of an average FRL number, it would defeat the whole point of sending Kirkwood to Liberty. Why not just send it to West if we can do that to Kirkwood?
And this is where we can't get too anal about a small, we got to have a reasonable range. We can't get too anal about it being too small, like all three high schools, just because we got them within 3 points. If you look at option A, I think it was within maybe 10 points, 10 points. We're viewing that as successful if it wasn't for the capacity issue. But
can I go back to that one point and then just tell me if I'm off topic? With voluntary transfers, 2 questions. Do we let people voluntarily transfer into a school that's over capacity?
no, not anymore.
Okay. And the board, announced it settles on a east side boundaries that don't include Old Hoover. Are you going to let people from Hoover who know that their kid's going to end up at Lemmy transfer out to Lemmy before Hoover closes? Because that's going to be the slow death of Hoover if that's allowed.
But they're allowed to do it today.
Depends if there's
Nothing
capacity at
depends.
Lemmy.
Yeah.
But there might not be capacity at either of those schools right now.
Right, if there's not capacity, we don't allow transfers, because what we do is we analyze it every year in July and look at seats available. And then, so if your aspirational goal is 28 kids in 5th grade at Lemmy and there's 25 kids in there, we don't let kids in then because we leave room for neighborhood growth. If there are 20 kids in there, we would let them in right now, regardless of where, they could live in Weber, Hoover, and if they were willing to transport the guideline says they're allowed to go in there. Doesn't matter where they're from.
Again, as long as you're not letting them into overcapacity schools, it's
Right.
probably not an issue.
Well,
But there is
that's-
going to be this moment when suddenly people know, oh, that's where we're going to end up, let's go now. But
Well,
if they were to all go, I mean,
And the challenge
people who
with it
stay
is.
would really suffer.
Yeah, the challenge with it is and that's, Chris mentioned this before, it used to be a lifetime pass. You went from Penn to Shimmick, and you got in as a kindergartner because there was class, and then you could go right through for 7 years, regardless of the growth that took place in Shimmick, regardless of whether classrooms were overcrowded. If you got in as a kindergartner, you could go right through to 7th grade. Now, we say you can get in as a kindergartner because there's room. Now, next July, we'll tell you if there's room in 1st grade, and then the next July, we'll tell you if there's room in 2nd grade. So,
With, suppose for hypothetical sake, I open enrolled my kids into Horn. Well, I live on the east side. When it's time for them to go to junior high,
they go back to Southeast because it's based on your physical address, not
and
where you went to
wouldn't
elementary.
give any special preference to an application to open enroll into Northwest then?
Voluntarily transfer into Northwest.
Well, sorry, yeah.
It takes about 2 months to get.
You were hearing from a
I'll
comment
correct
earlier who
regularly.
basically had that question.
Yeah.
There in Alexandria, their kids go to Lemmy. When that kid comes out of Lemmy, there's no.
They go to Northwest.
They're gonna go to Northwest.
Yeah, now they can apply to go to Southeast if there's seats available there. And if there are more kids that request going into 7th grade at Southeast than there are seats available, then we lottery them off.
Okay, but there are no seats available at Southeast, right?
Right, no, but I'm saying like in the, moving
future.
forward, casting ahead, so now we've redistributed the students, so one would presume that when the Alexander kids go to Northwest, there's gonna be room available at Southeast,
And all,
right?
oh, the Alexander kids will apply for it.
All right, so now but the other board practice in the past has always been you can't open transfer the year that, you can't, I just
Oh, is that
mixed
right?
them up. You can't voluntarily transfer the year that the first year that it's in place. So if they wanted to voluntarily transfer thereafter, so you got a 4th grader at Alexander, we put it in place, your kid gets ready to be a 7th grader, you want him to go to Southeast, you put in for a voluntary transfer. If there's seats available, you can go. If there are more applications than seats available, then we lottery them off. But then as an 8th grader, you have to reapply.
And I think I would just.
Would you have to go through the lottery a second time?
If there were more applicants than seats available, yes, you
So
would.
you wouldn't have any.
That's problematic for people who
Yeah.
have twins.
Yeah.
You might pull one of my kids, and then my other kid is across town.
That's
Yeah.
why you're incented to go to your home school.
Yeah.
I'm just giving that as an example.
Yep.
No, it's a good.
Right now, there's
Y'all
no
gonna make me move
voluntary
anyway.
transfers into the high school, right?
No, both high schools are closed to voluntary transfer.
Will that change when Liberty opens, you think?
It's for us to decide.
Yeah, that's a board decision when we get to that.
If we went off past practice, they would open up if there's capacity.
The other thing to think about is, so we talk about the seats available, but it also impacts staffing for all of our principals. So the seats available term is a little bit loose. You know, we might have room in the building, but do we have room in our class
Right.
sections? And
We do
that's the
seats
conversation
available
we're having.
differently at the junior high than we do at the elementary, because in the elementary, we can say Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones has 22 kids or 28 kids in the class. At the secondary level, we base it on staffing and capacity at the building, so it's a little less visibly objective.
So, I mean, there's gonna come a moment when the City High second phase is built, when there's gonna be lots of seats available for a while. Are we gonna be in a position where suddenly,
Not really,
most of
'cause-
Alexander is gonna be applying to go to City High?
We're way over the theoretical capacity today, so I mean,
But it's gonna go down when we,
But
it's gonna go down to capacity.
5 years from now, right, is what you're looking at. So, the Alexander
be
kids have
back
been
up.
moved to Northwest. Now there's capacity at City High. Can they then voluntarily transfer in as a high school student? There's seats available, they sure can, under that process. And if there's a lot of seats available where you don't have to worry about a lottery year after year after year, parents would be more inclined to do that than in years when they're not. Because that's usually the conversation we have with parents when they
That's the
say, hey, can I send my kid to Northwest?
For
Yeah,
one
we
year.
got a lot of capacity at Northwest. Do I have a pretty good chance of getting in there as an 8th grader too? Yeah, you got a great chance of getting in as an 8th grader. Fine, I'll move. Can I send my kid to North Central? You know what? We're not gonna have room there next year. I don't think I wanna do it this year and then not get in next year kind of thing. So that's what parents do a lot of times, is they cast forward and say, what do you think my odds are next year and thereafter, depending on how long they're gonna be
there's
there.
a lot trickier with high school when you're there for 4 years. All right.
Yep. And you got athletics to deal with, and you got extracurriculars to deal with, and so I think that plays a role too.
All right, anything else for this one tonight? I'm going to suggest two things. Strategic plan, it's in your packet. Take a look. What we want to do is have Steve give us the next level. We were going to go through a couple of specific examples, so if anybody stayed for that, I apologize, but may want to go anyway, right? Go home at some point. I'm going to suggest we build these planks into the going meeting process so that we start going through this. Ask for Steve for a process to go through it. I mean, if you want to spend 30 seconds on it, we can, but I'm going to suggest if we get into it, we might
It's
get
that
in.
fan on the other side of the table. Right?
If we get into it, we might get into it,
Yeah.
and we might be here for half an hour.
It's a big conversation, so yeah.
So how about we build that into future reviews, and then we'll table board goals and actions. Any objection to that? Which would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.